Welcome back to another episode of Building Up Your Business, the podcast. I'm your host, Erica Dill with Operationally Up. We've got another fantastic episode for you today. We're talking about the real SEO playbook from basics to AI. And I'm super excited to have our guest today, Sam Warren. Thank you, Sam, for coming on with us.
Erica, thanks so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I'm really excited to dive into this topic today because it's obviously near and dear to my heart.
I was going to say a great passion of yours, and those are the type of people we love having on this podcast. Sam is a lifelong entrepreneur and a CEO at Rank Pay, where he helps small and mid-sized businesses turn digital marketing into a true profit center. With over 11 years of experience in search marketing and a deep commitment to EOS principles, Sam and his team specialize in replacing chaotic DIY marketing with right-sized, scalable systems that actually drive growth. Over the past 18 years, he's helped hundreds of businesses cut through the noise, gain real traction, and stop second-guessing their marketing decisions. And I know one of the things that he's going to correct me on almost immediately is that he is powered by a fabulous team over there at Rank Pay. So sorry about that, Sam, but I know your team is strong with you and holding true.
Quite all right. Yeah, it takes a village. It takes a village.
It does take a village. So I just want to jump right in to the great questions that we've got going on in this wonderful discussion today. So SEO has evolved tremendously over the last few years, tons of years, ever since it became a thing. What does SEO really mean in 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's actually a great dovetail from me saying it takes a village because, back in the day, it kind of didn't. I mean, now it'd have to go more than 10 years ago for me to say that, but maybe 15 years ago, SEO, I mean, it was much more surface level and it's so much more holistic these days that you actually do need a variety of specialists and knowledge bases that it's kind of a big ask for one person. But as far as what SEO means in 2025, honestly, in some ways in the last 10 years, the fundamentals haven't really changed a whole lot, despite the landscape rapidly evolving in the last 12 months. And what I mean by that is that like the core job of doing SEO is still the same because search engines and AI now, they want to surface the most useful, trustworthy answers for a human's query. And, SEO today is still focused on influencing which businesses are going to show up for that query or be referenced in it or cited in it. So, I mean, yes, like I said, the landscape is changing a lot, but the fundamentals for how that's being influenced today, there's going to be some lag time with that I think we'll have plenty of chances to dive into later, and we've already alluded to it in other conversations we've had. But the last thing I want to say about it before, because I know you'll have follow-on questions for this too, is that
Sure will.
It depends on industry as well, because some industries are changing a lot more than others in terms of the user behavior and then how SEO is changing to impact that stuff. Because, transactional queries on Google are rapidly evolving with more and more ad exposure in those search result pages. And therefore the tactics for them may not change as much as somebody who's like a national B2B brand focused on content exposure to a broad national audience. Those queries are more and more in AI and those tactics are going to rapidly evolve.
Okay, well, I had a couple of next questions in mind, but now I'd rather just dig deeper on that. Sure. So please, before I ask any questions, tell us more.
Yeah, so I think, if I were going to hone in on one topic, it would be this industry bit, because I think that's really fascinating. An auto repair shop we'll cover a few different industries. So
Great.
Just let's say there's 2 to 4 location, maybe San Diego based auto repair shop. Their business is still, it's going to be phone calls from people who have a problem with their car. And those people are still by and large turning to Google today, often on the map on their phone or on their laptop, typing in auto repair near me if they don't already have a family mechanic they like going to.
Sure.
And they're just going to look for best reviews, best visibility. And, in that case, I mean, what SEO means to that business is actually not a whole lot different from what it was 10 years ago. They need to rank number one in either the map pack or organic, or, ads take up more real estate now. So in the in the ads as well, ideally all three, if you can get the client to buy in to do that. So yeah, they still want to rank number one for auto repair near me, or auto repair San Diego, or best auto mechanic San Marcos, whatever. So that hasn't changed a whole lot. But these longer tail informational queries are becoming
Mm-hmm.
conversations with AI, right?
Right.
And think about your user experience that you've talked to me about how you use ChatGPT, and I've shared. I'm the same. I have these engaged discussions to educate myself about a topic that I'm interested in. It's no longer just like a simple query to Google to
Mm-hmm.
get a long form blog that now I'm going to read, because shoot, I can have an AI parse that long form blog that maybe there's tons of great information in there and it needs to be in there, but I'm just going to get the cliff notes from
Right.
ChatGPT, then I'll ask a couple of questions and move on. So it's evolving more rapidly for national B2B entities today. But I mean, we could even go into tactics, I think, at some point, because those tactics are, it's still the same pillars, which I think is also interesting, but some of the specifics are evolving.
Well, and at this podcast, we target like what entrepreneurs and executives need to know in like that quick snippet. So before we get too much deeper into these things, what are going to be the core that almost every executive, every CEO really needs to understand about SEO, so they have that basic knowledge?
Yeah, and I think you framed this question super well, because I know this because our clients, of course, are typically going to be the business owners themselves, because we're working with small to
Right.
mid-sized companies primarily. So you know, I know there's just so much to think about as a business owner myself. It's kind of like, hey, we need to give you something bite-sized that you can kind of hang
Mm-hmm.
on to and go, okay, like what are we doing here, here, here? All right, we tick these boxes, great. I don't need to know the details, but at least we're covering our bases. So I do this with prospects and new clients, and often reminding existing clients too, of these pillars and like why we're tackling them. So the first I'm going to say is like site user experience.
Okay.
Is the site fast to load? Does it work on a mobile phone correctly? Is it clear and easy to understand what the website's about? Because you have to think this is a two-way street. Like if users are having trouble understanding what it's about, search engines probably will, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
because like there are specific ways you're going to tailor to each, but you have to balance those two in the equation. Um, and just stop me if you want to like dig in on any one. But so first is
I was gonna
user
say I'm gonna try
experience.
to keep mental notes of things so I don't interrupt you.
Oh, I'll do a final recap too. User
Oh,
experience,
good.
technical health of the website. So we covered experience, but the back end of the website has to be like, you have to have that house in order, because if search engines
Mm,
can't crawl, render, and understand the site without friction, you are losing the race before it's even started. Because
interesting.
and it's one of those frustrating ones for business owners, because if it's done right, it's almost invisible, in that business owners don't want to get to that level of technical understanding of what's going on with structured data on
Sure.
the back end of a website to actually see that the work has been done. So it's kind of invisible when you do it right, but it is, I mean, absolutely damaging if it's not done. Because you
Mm,
just, Google just can't prioritize like understanding what's happening on your website and what it's about and your authority. So they're just like, well, I guess we're just not going to show this site the way that they'd want it to be shown. Um, so we got site front end, we'll call it user experience, site back end, technical health.
hmm
Third would be content quality and intent. And like I think I'd love to talk later about how like AI is impacting content, and how people think AI can just, oh, well, I'll just have AI write 1,000 blogs about my topic and that'll work, right? I mean, not really. And the point is,
Mm,
you have to have a strategy behind the content, because it has to be structured in, ideally a hierarchical way, where you've got some like root topic you want to explore, and then you're going to answer all of these other questions that people might have about that root topic in other content, and have that like feeding back into the main content loop. So are you, at the end of the day, it really boils down to like, are you answering real questions in a structured and intentional way? Or are you just publishing content to check a box? And in most cases, the latter is not going to accomplish anything. Whereas the former, yeah, if you're doing that, then that's, you're kind of ticking that box. Make sense?
So that's really, really interesting. And you mentioned it a couple of times in there.
Hmm.
I want to get back to websites because I have a specific question. But when we're talking about search engines reading, you mentioned about reading the back end and it should be almost invisible. How are search engines actually reading this data? How is that? Tell us in layman's terms.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And of course, like a lot of this is inferred based on experience and experiments and kind of industry best practices. But we have to remember before I even get into this that like Google does not disclose and how
Right.
their algorithm works, and
And they
you
change it
know
frequently, don't they?
yeah, they are changing it frequently. At, we'll say, most of the time it's small scale tweaks, and then other times, yeah, I mean, once a year, maybe twice a year, you get some like broader changes, and then maybe once every couple of years, you have like seismic changes about how they do things.
Mm,
Um, so I think I use that word read too, but I think it's important also to remember that like search engines, they're really like they're not reading like a human. They're kind of ingesting what is the site. They're breaking it down into like subtopics and root topics, and then they're really looking at the site compared to a search query and saying, is this piece of content, whether that's a landing page or a blog or a white paper, whatever, is this the best answer for this specific query from a source we trust? Like that's what
mm.
Google's essentially doing. Still is. So we've covered that I'm relying on my current and best understanding because, again, somebody might listen to this podcast in 6 months and say, well, that's not true anymore. So,
Yeah.
you've got the date on the podcast. This stuff changes a lot. Um,
We'll have
but
you
yeah,
on in another 8 months, and then you can update us.
yeah, there you go. I'm sure a lot will have changed at that point. So we talked before about how like the core job hasn't really changed, trying to show the most useful result to a human. And because of that, the intent of that search is the most important thing. Because Google's not ranking pages in a vacuum. They're ranking answers for that humans like what were they trying to get done with that search.
Mm,
So beyond looking to make sure that there's that content on the site, which it does, right? And we use structured data on the back end of the website to identify specific pieces of content for specific purposes and specific things about that business so that Google can see that in a heartbeat. It's something that you or I, when we look at a website, we like, we're kind of doing the same thing, but we're intuiting it. Whereas
sure.
obviously algorithm's not a human, so it can't intuit something. It's just like mechanically trying to intuit through the algorithm. Um, and then it's going to be looking for authority. Same things you and I are going to look for. Where's the logo wall? Who have they worked with? Is this a trustworthy
Mm,
source? Google, on the other hand, is primarily using backlinks for that kind of authority
right.
referencing from other websites. So is it a real brand or is it just a page trying to rank? Have they shown up before on this topic? Have they been featured in other news outlets about this topic, etc.? And then lastly, they're looking for relevance. So like based on the latest crawl, and Google crawls websites on a recurring basis, right? Because it's not like every time you run a Google search, Google goes and crawls every website that might be relevant and spits out the result. They have to be mindful about when are they crawling websites, which is why
Mm,
it's an important SEO tactic or best practice strategy to consistently be updating your site with new content, because the more often
mm.
you update content on the site, the more often Google's going to crawl it. So that's in your best interest for a variety of reasons. So based on that latest crawl, excuse me, just makes a sip of water.
It's going around. Everybody's got a little tickle in their throat.
Right. So based on that latest crawl, like, does the site actually cover this topic in a meaningful and robust way? Not just having it at a keyword level, but having it like breakout conversations happening on the website, about that subject matter. Does that make sense? It's a lot of technical stuff, I know.
No, I think that's a very thorough answer without killing us with too many big words that we maybe don't understand.
I
Um,
hope not. I can really get in the weeds.
you're passionate about it. It's
I
what you
am.
do. We would hope so. I would be worried if you didn't. So one
Yeah.
of the things that I had heard is that certain okay, like as we can say, most business owners try to do a lot of this stuff themselves, right? They want to
Hmm.
get things up inexpensively, quickly. Maybe they have an admin who's helping to fill in data, post blog articles, things like that.
Right.
um, what I have heard though is that some of these DIY easy to use website builders are not as quote unquote readable or scannable as others. Is that true?
Yes, with some caveats. And some of this, so some of my answers, I'll kind of preface and say there's a little bit of subjectivity to them,
Got
and
it.
some of them are objective. So most of the stuff we've talked about prior are objective, in my opinion. I mean, they are like wide. It's not just my opinion that these are the pillars of an SEO strategy, and it's not me just spouting off what I think Google's doing.
Yeah,
It's
your
pretty well
feelings.
accepted. This one's a little more subjective, and it's also dependent again on like the business and where they're at. I'd actually love to use an analogy from a call I had this morning with a prospect who is on Squarespace, which is a
Hmm.
DIY friendly builder budget. Um, but they've been in business for 20 years. They have a staff of 70, like
Wow.
it's a real business, and their site does not do their brand any credibility justice. And beyond
Mm.
that, which is of course subjective marketing opinion, it is not showing up versus their competitors because of a variety of reasons that I could detail here. So, to answer your question from an SEO standpoint alone, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with Wix or Squarespace. I mean, you're uploading content to the internet. It should fundamentally be crawlable and discoverable to Google as long as make sure that you have basics like sitemap and robots.txt and X and all this fun stuff that we don't need to get into the trenches on. Um, but from a standpoint of like having a robust content library, regularly working on your site to make sure that you're deploying the best structured data practices, the availability of like pretty advanced SEO plugins that are readily available and free on WordPress or a platform similar, they're just not there for Squarespace.
Got it.
And Wix has spent a lot of marketing dollars to tell you that they are just as good as WordPress from an SEO perspective, and perhaps in the right hands they are. But I think the subjective vibe in the SEO ecosystem is that yeah, you need a grown-up website if you're a grown-up business, and there are further reasons for that, like customizability, being able to promote your brand the way you want to without the limitations that the DIY ones will put on you, which is by design,
Sure.
because if they were super customizable, then it wouldn't be friendly for a non-developer to go in and work in it anymore.
To use. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you kind of hinted on a few of the things that people need to know about SEO. The different pillars, things like that. What are some of those really big misconceptions that, and I'm sure you hear them because when you have prospective clients come in, you're like, "Ooh, that's not exactly what you think." So, share some of those with us.
Yeah, there are a lot with SEO.
Let's go
Um,
top three, maybe.
no, I can keep it focused. It's just I think most listeners will probably already have some of these in mind. Um,
Oh.
yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people feel that SEO is largely driven by smoke and mirrors, and
Mm.
I don't think that belief came out of nowhere, honestly. And I'll tie it into the next one, which I think a lot of people still believe that SEO is basically black hat hacking. And again, like I think they come from a real place of like early on. I'll do a little history and explain where I think those misconceptions come from. Is that early on SEO was like a much more standalone practice, which I know I've already said. There
Right.
was a period of time, like I don't know, 2008 to 2012, where like having your keywords on a page and building low quality backlinks, but a lot of them actually worked to rank a website.
Mm.
So Google just wasn't sophisticated at that point, and this was like the early days of search. So I think as what was required to get businesses to rank over time evolved, like very strongly through like 2011 through 2012 through 2015, 2016. I think a lot of SEO agencies were entrenched with companies as clients at that point, and they were clinging on to the old ways and not adapting to what needed to be done because change is hard. And I think therefore they started needing to obscure kind of their tactics and what they were doing because they didn't want to talk about it because they didn't know how to adapt or were unwilling.
Got it.
I think that's where those misconceptions come from. I think we're pretty far from those days. I mean, those entities, those agencies are still out there that are kind of just relying on old school, outdated tactics and methods. And unfortunately, at least half of the prospects that I speak to, I mean, they have had a bad experience with an agency like that. But I think over time that'll hopefully, I guess, lessen. Although we're already kind of seeing bad actors about the AI stuff. So we can talk about that too if you're curious later on.
Yeah, I definitely want to save some time to talk about AI, but I want to get to one other topic. As I kind of had said earlier, when you're first starting out a business and you've got, limited resources and, if you're going to have to spend money on things, SEO is probably not one of the first things that you spend money on, unfortunately. I know, Sam, you probably would argue against that, but that's okay. What are some of the things that people need to, the potholes they need to stay out of when they're first starting off, first getting their website up, doing some of these things? What are those things that they need to avoid in those missteps so that they kind of know before they're ready to fully dig in?
Yeah, this is a tough one because again, I think which are the questions I like, honestly, because it requires some creativity with the answers. Because I think again, so much of this depends on okay, when a business is just starting, right? Let's say we'll tailor the answer to businesses that are truly in a startup phase.
Right.
I think they have to be the expectation that oh, well, if I just rank for this keyword, all of my business problems will be solved. I meet a lot of business owners who are very obsessed with that. And they also don't understand that if you are starting from scratch and there are established heavy hitting competitors in your space, this is a years long journey of consistent investment to actually reap rewards. Which is why a lot of our programs and I'm not going to make it about me, I'm just saying a lot of marketing agencies like my own, we will do ads and SEO at the same time because that business needs to get people in the door to
Sure.
justify the investment in marketing. And the SEO timeline for ROI can be quite long if you're entering a competitive space with a new entity and no historical footprint. That's just the way it is. And there's no shortcut around that. So I think the biggest mistake is expectations and them being misaligned with today's reality. And I'd also say that I think it's probably agreed that this would be an objective observation that the organic landscape has consolidated over the last decade for sure with money and resources, meaning the heavier hitters are just more and more dominant in the organic results, and they are harder and harder to topple in terms of oh, I want to rank number one for this custom iPhone case I make. Well, you are not going to top the Amazon, Walmart, and Etsy listings no matter what you ever do. So that's just a reality check. I mean, there's more if we want to go deeper. Your call on the timeline.
Well, there's so many things that we could go down, but yeah. I know, and I've tried to talk a lot about on this podcast, I've tried to talk a lot about AI because everybody wants to know how AI is actually affecting some of these topics. And of course, there's so many things that are happening with AI. We can't keep up to date because it's changing rapidly, hourly, really.
Yeah.
And one of the really burning, I mean, there's so many ways, but I want to start with, you know what? I'll start a little broad before I get into one of the burning questions that I have. So give us an overview. How is AI really actually reshaping SEO? Is it even reshaping SEO? What are we seeing?
Yeah, so this is a hot topic, right? Everybody's talking about it. Every business owner is concerned about it. How am I showing up in AI? You've got people in their ear saying SEO is dead and nobody uses Google anymore.
Right.
Do you ever use Google anymore? And of course, I mean, it probably goes without saying, but that is not true. It may be true in that time frame we just said, 6 to 12 months. I don't know. Although to be honest, I will throw my hat in the ring. I would not count Google out. I mean, they are they have a lot of resources and they have the most to lose here. And I would not bet against them to be able to figure out how to win this AI race. But anyway, that's just me throwing that out there for my prediction, so I can come back and say, like, listen to that podcast. No, I was saying Google's gonna win. So it is reshaping it. However, I think everybody's really excited about, like, oh, well, I talked to this company that knows how to impact AI visibility, and it's really just SEO right now. Like, I mean, it's actually not, there is no proven way to try to influence an LLM in the way that SEO impacts Google right now. Like, there is no proven methodology beyond SEO. So these AI, like selling AI optimization, I mean, there are a lot of companies that only sell that. And if you look up news stories, there are ones that recently had like a lot of press. They got funding. They started rolling out their footprint. And one of them had, you could look them up. I'm not going to reference them by name, but it's, up to you guys to look it up there. And the CEO came out after folding, the company folded, and he came out and said, honestly, like, we folded intentionally because, like, we realized, like, we're just doing SEO. Like, there's actually, like, we were just trying to, like, put this, we didn't mean it at the beginning, but we found that everything we were doing is just already out there. Like, so the best practices right now, you got to think about how these AIs work and how they try to get their information. And it's, a lot of times you'll see the sources that they're leveraging, and it's Google and Bing. So, I mean, they're even piggybacking off search engine architecture for, like, what kind of results should be shown for a certain query if it doesn't have, like, an instant answer, right? So it's changing a lot. Gemini itself has maybe the biggest potential to change how SEO works because it's obviously native to Google, and that's where SEO's footprint is biggest right now. But yeah, so I think there are some big headwinds, but yeah, I wouldn't count Google out for figuring this out on the Gemini front, and it kind of remains to be seen, like, how tactics will evolve to start influencing LLMs over time.
Well, and my big question, obviously I work in consumer goods, so the hot new thing is now you can talk with chat and it can actually recommend products. You can actually search in it to buy products. And we were doing some testing with one of my clients the other day and noticing that when you were shopping through chat and getting recommendations, it was just giving the top sellers from Walmart, Amazon, Target. And if you were to go and do a Google search for that product, they were just coming up. So they were coming up as the same ones and the top ones. Is that what you're seeing? Give us a little bit more into what you're seeing.
Yeah, I guess, like, if I were to rephrase, yes, yes, and it's kind of like, I think the AI is reshaping our behavior more than SEO strategy itself. Like, that's kind of, if I had to summarize everything I was just saying, it's that. It's that right now our user behavior is evolving a lot, and, like, the strategies for SEO, they're just not evolved enough to be warranted being called something different, or like, oh, we're in like phase 3.0 of SEO or something. We're just not there yet. But the behavior is changing quickly. And a case in point for you is, like, okay, let's say 2 years ago, if I had a cocktail at a restaurant I really liked, I'd go Google that cocktail and look up the recipe, and then I'd do all this experimenting and whatever, and that's useful. But today, as a person that uses ChatGPT all the time, I can go in there and say, hey, like you said, voice chat. Let's say it's voice chat. Hey, I just had this cocktail. What are the ingredients? And, like, what are some mixes on it that you think I'd like more based on what you know about my preferences? And then I can, like, nitpick it a little bit. We land on a recipe. I hit the store and, like, cool. Now I've got a totally custom recipe for some cocktail I really like. That is way more useful for me than trolling through static recipes on Google. And like, Google knows that. They know that, like, that interaction for me was better and it doesn't have to be chat. It could have been Gemini. It could have been Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT, pick your poison. But that experience was much better for me than going to Google to look for a static recipe. So, those sites that make their money on ad revenue for having recipes listed, I mean, there's a big shakeup here, because you got to ask, like, well, if ChatGPT doesn't have people financially incentivized to create and promote those recipes, the good ones, which they wouldn't if all the responses come from chat and you don't get a click through to that site, so they don't get their ad
Right.
revenue, nobody's going to be making those recipes anymore. And then where's chat going to get its information for that stuff if nobody's incentivized to make the content anymore? So,
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with all that, but it's really interesting to me anyway, as a search
And
geek.
that actually, as a search geek, I love that.
Yeah.
That actually makes me think back to a comment that you had said earlier in this episode
Hmm.
about putting together a website and just using AI generated content and throwing it up on the website.
Yeah.
And you kind of, yeah, okay, good. You remember. So please dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, so look, there is nothing wrong with using AI as part of your content creation strategy. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, I do. It's a force multiplier. Like, but you have to view it as a force multiplier and not a replacement for thinking and strategy. Like,
Mm,
because it's incredibly helpful for researching, outlining, summarizing, drafting. I mean, it can speed up production. It's also great for gleaning insights from like large data sets and
sure.
identifying content gaps with, you can pull reports of what content like six of your competitors have and where are the gaps and the opportunities, and it can parse that
Mm-hmm.
information so much faster than a
Yeah.
human. So it's great for that stuff. But the line gets crossed for me when AI is used to create content without intent or like any human accountability. Because like it has to, I believe we need to have AI work as like a support for a human point of view. Um,
Correct.
it just it just doesn't replace that. So I think it remains to be seen how AI and Google will treat human versus AI content, if it's even going to be able to, it's not even that accurate at telling what is AI versus human content right now. There have been limited experiments from certain search engine optimization companies that show that human content ranks better, but like I don't know how long that's going to be true. And they're limited scale experiments. You can only do your best to try to surmise like the results. They're using nonsense words on this site created by AI and
Yeah.
nonsense words created by humans on this side. So I guess we don't really know where that's all going, but I would not use AI to just spit out 1,000 articles and throw them onto your website and just be like, great, now I have an awesome content library that rivals my competitors. Without strategy and like human editing and stuff like that, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment. I think you're just wasting time,
Right.
if
Right.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. Um, we could go into so many more topics. There were so many nuggets we didn't even get to, but we don't want to drown on forever. We always like to end our episodes with leaving our listeners with one thing that they need to take with them today, something they could go and implement in their business tomorrow and make an impact. Sam, what are you going to tell people to remember from today?
Oh, summer, so many things that and they're all so specific to different businesses. Try not to be overwhelmed. If you
Okay.
are getting started, it is very easy to get overwhelmed. Just
Mm,
do some fundamental basics, get those in place, and try to tackle one thing at a time. And don't cut corners, because cutting the corners is just going to lead you to misery, and have realistic expectations. So that's like five, but
no. But I think the one that I really like, two of the ones that I think you really like that you mentioned
mm,
is number one about AI. Don't just throw up a bunch of AI content. Try to think
yeah,
through
please
with
don't.
purpose. You can do that in your business tomorrow. Put together a strategy, and you can still use AI to supplement that. And number two, I love that you mentioned about the realistic expectations. When we talk about long-term strategy versus short-term strategy, as far as gaining views or impressions or clients, hopefully, know when it's a short game and know when it's a long game. And I think that is some fantastic tidbits to leave our listeners with. Sam, thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Great conversation. And you have joined us for another episode of Building Up Your Business, the podcast. Remember, we are here every 2 weeks with another great pro. And until then, from bombs to order fulfillment, marketing to taxes, learn the stuff from the pros before you step in it. I'm Erica Dill, your host with Operationally Up. Remember, we are here to help your consumer goods business build operationally and supply chain for maximum profitability. We'll see you again in another 2 weeks. Have a great day.